The Range Rover Sport has always been the most dynamic of the Range Rover family, and the previous generation SVR was arguably the lariest of its type in the segment. Now Range Rover is back with an even more focused version, and it's the new Range Rover Sport SV. And in typical fashion, it has been completely engineered to make things as exciting as possible while still delivering that all-rounder ability that we'd expect from a true Range Rover. Now, we've come out to sunny Portugal to test it out on track at the famous Portimao circuit, and we're going to be testing it on the public highway to see whether or not this latest sporty Range Rover Sport can deliver the kind of experience we'd expect. Now, when it comes to styling, this new car has been beefed up over the regular Sport, and that was already quite an aggressive looking car. So we've got a slightly sharper front end, and on the corners we can actually get 23-inch carbon wheels, which are a first of their kind for a vehicle like this. This one, however, is riding on more standard alloy wheels, which might be a better option if you're often parking it in cities, let's be honest. But it's inside and underneath where this car really steps up its game, even against the standard Range Rover Sport. The standard ergonomics of the Range Rover Sport's interior haven't changed too much in the switch to SV, but there are a few key upgrades that help differentiate it from the more normal versions, and reviews of that you can check out on our site currently. Chief among these upgrades include the large sport seats, which have the SV logo integrated into them, and a redesigned steering wheel, which I think is quite a cool feature. It has a very big SV button right down in the bottom, which glows red when you change the mode, and anything that glows red is of course going to make any car quicker. This car also has these shift paddles which have the tops which are clear, and again those illuminate red when you've changed driving modes. Elsewhere we've got the large central screen with the PV Pro system that of course we really like because it's responsive and it's got loads of features, and there's a digital dial setup ahead of you too. Integrated into this car, and something which is new for the Range Rover, is the seating system, which has small pads which create vibrations, and they tie into whichever type of music you're listening to. So, for instance, if you're playing some dance music, it might hit the bass like that, and every time it sends a shockwave through the back of you. It's quite exciting and quite interesting, and it's one thing that you really have to test out to believe. You do have to have it toned down a little bit, as we found it made you feel a little bit poorly if it's too high straight away. The cabin quality is good though, and everything is nicely finished and put together, but I would like some more upmarket materials, mainly in the middle. This black plastic, just as it is on the standard Range Rover, feels just a little bit downhill in comparison to the rest of the car, and it also shows up all of those fingerprints and bits of dust. I'd just like that to be carbon fibre or something else entirely. Thankfully, the level of spaciousness that you get in this SV version is uninterrupted in comparison to the standard Range Rover Sport. Even with the fitment of those big carbon-backed bucket seats, there's still loads of room for my feet and loads of room for my knees too. One thing I would say is that, as with most large carbon buckets, it does take away from your sightline when you are sitting back here, so you do feel a little more cocooned than you might otherwise feel in a standard Sport. However, the space is all good, so this is still going to be a very practical car to use on a daily basis. Core to the new Range Rover Sport SV is the 4.4 litre twin turbocharged V8 engine with 626 brake horsepower, making it the most powerful Range Rover to date. Of course, that equates to a 0 to 60 mile an hour time of, well, just over 3 seconds really, and it's all sent to the road via an 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox. You can just list those off, you can list numbers and figures off all you like, but what is it like to drive? Well, it's quite capable really. It's still a very big bus of course, and you have to deal with quite a lot of weight, but thanks to the revisions that have been made to this car, it manages to hold its weight together superbly well. We've been able to try it out on track today at the famous Portimao circuit, and it's remarkable how a car that weighs well over 2.5 tons can handle itself over steep inclines and big changes in direction and not completely feel like it's out of its depth. You have got different modes to go through, so you can have it in standard comfort, and actually it's this car's ride which shines through. It's able to deal with those really bad imperfections in the road very well, even though it's riding on very big alloy wheels. We've tested that one with the 23-inch carbons today, and even with those it still feels remarkably composed. Is it still the hooligan that the SVR was? Well, it feels a little more grown up than it was beforehand. It still has a superb engine note and in SV mode You're still getting all of that excellent V8 noise coming through, but it doesn't feel quite as leery. I think that's more to do with the fact that it's just even more composed than its predecessor. The gear shifts are nice and smooth too, and we have found that actually the car has got so much torque that sometimes you need to be in a slightly higher gear than you might expect. It can just lead itself to feeling a little bit rev high. You need to shift up a little bit earlier and use those deep wells of torque instead of revving it out. Like a naturally aspirated car, this is a very heavily turbocharged engine, and it feels like that when you're up and running. What's it like to live with as a standard Range Rover Sport? Well, the ride is ever so slightly firmer than a normal car's, but it's not too discernible. And the steering itself is nicely judged so that you are able to pick it through tighter roads and around town without too much hassle. And that was always the great thing about the older SVR. We could do pretty much everything you wanted it to do on a daily basis, as well as being a bit crazy, and that feels similar to this. It's just that craziness has been toned down ever so slightly. Combined, Range Rover says that you should be able to just get over 24 mpg, and I think that might be a bit of a stretch. During mixed driving today, we've seen about 19, and when you're going a little bit quicker, it's not going to be hard for that to drop considerably. So expect some pretty hefty fuel bills if you are running the Range Rover Sport SV. But you still get the excellent driving position that you get in the standard car. You can still get the seat relatively low in comparison to the overall size of the car. And because of the way that the suspension setup is designed with its cross-hydraulic system, it always feels flat and level. It's able to manage its own body weight remarkably well, even when you are pushing on. But in an everyday sense, that also means that it's not going to feel too roly-poly, and that's good for the kids because they're not going to be feeling sick in the back seat, because often with large performance vehicles they can struggle to contain their own body weight and loll up from one side to the other. You don't get that in the SV. It's very composed and remarkably well controlled, again considering how large a car it is. The exhaust is still superb. It's again not quite as leery as the one on the old SVR, but I still think it's going to be quite exciting. And of course, well, plenty of people put aftermarket exhausts on these cars and make them even louder than they already are, but I don't think as a standard vehicle you're going to be too disappointed with the way this car sounds. And in true JLR fashion, it's also equipped with plenty of off-road driving modes. It doesn't have a low-range gearbox, but it does have plenty of different driving settings to be able to get you up and down slippery conditions. You can fit, of course, all-seasons tyres and off-road tyres to the Range Rover Sport SV. It's not a desired intention, of course, but if you did want to take it off-road, it certainly can handle some sticky situations, and it can definitely do the inclines and the descents. In fact, you're able to take off the front splitter with just 8 screws, and that gives you better departure and approach angles if you are really tackling some tricky stuff. The changes that have been made to the Range Rover Sport to switch it into this SV version are, well, comprehensive. It drives in a completely different manner. It feels far more composed, well contained, and even more exciting to drive. We've tested it today both on-road, off-road, and also a little bit on track too. And considering that it's able to manage track driving and off-road driving, shows the breadth of capability that this car has. Now, of course, you are going to be paying more for all of that ability, and with a smattering of options, you could be looking at a £200,000 car. But what you will be getting is a real all-rounder that can inject some true excitement even into everyday driving. The Range Rover Sport SV had a lot to live up to, particularly when compared to its SVR predecessor, but I think the changes that have been made onto this latest version mean that it's a true contender in this high-performance luxury SUV segment. Thank you for watching this Motors new car review on the Range Rover Sport SV. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please leave us a like below and let us know in the comment section what you think of this latest performance Range Rover. Would you pick it, or would you be going for something like an Aston Martin DBX 707? And as always, please remember to subscribe to the Motors YouTube channel. If you hit that bell icon, you'll get a notification directly to your inbox each time we upload a new review.